They never saw it coming. They never imagined, not even in their most fleeting thoughts, that you would be the one to shake the ground beneath their feet. That you, the one they underestimated, dismissed, ridiculed, would be the one to make them question everything they ever did, every word they uttered with certainty, every rule they imposed without thought, every assumption they wore like armor. You were never meant to disrupt their world. You were meant to follow, to stay silent, to mold yourself into the space they carved for you, to nod along, to exist without ever making them uncomfortable. They wrote your story before you even knew how to hold the pen. And for a while, you let them. For a while, you let them believe that their version of you was the only one that could ever exist. But something changed. A shift, small at first, like a whisper in the back of your mind, a restless stirring in your chest, a question you didn't dare speak aloud, but one that refused to be silenced. What if they're wrong? What if everything they taught you, everything they swore was truth, was nothing more than a fragile illusion? What if the only reason they insisted so loudly that they were right was because they were terrified they might be wrong? You were the moment they never prepared for, the deviation in their carefully crafted script. And the day you stopped accepting their truth as your own was the day their world began to fracture. Because they built their power on certainty, on the belief that no one would ever challenge them, that their way was the only way. And yet, here you stand, proof that they never had control. Proof that their rules were nothing more than walls made of glass, shattering the second you had the courage to push against them. That's why this moment matters, because for too long, they held the pen. For too long, they told you who to be. They never considered the possibility that you would write a new story, one where they are no longer the authors, no longer the ones who dictate the ending. And now, as they watch you step beyond the limits they placed around you, as they scramble to understand what they never saw coming, they are left with only one question, one that echoes in their minds louder than they ever dared to admit. What if we were wrong about you? What if, in trying to control you, they only created the force that would one day break them? What if the very person they tried to shape in their image was the one who would shatter everything they built? They should have thought about that before they tried to define you, but they didn't. And now it's too late. From the moment you took your first breath, they were already building the walls around you. They called it protection, called it guidance, called it love. But what they never admitted, what they refused to even acknowledge, was that those walls were not built for your safety. They were built for their comfort. They were crafted with the sole purpose of keeping you contained, keeping you predictable, keeping you under their control. They handed you a script before you even knew how to speak, before you had the chance to write a single word of your own, a script laced with rules you never agreed to, expectations you never set for yourself. They told you who you were before you had the chance to discover it for yourself, and worse, they expected you to accept it without question. This is the way things are, they told you. This is the way things have always been, as if history alone was reason enough for obedience. They dressed their control in careful words, softened their demands with smiles and reassurance. We only want the best for you, they said, but somehow their idea of best always meant less, always meant smaller, always meant quieter. They handed you a mold and expected you to fit into it, never once considering the possibility that you were never meant to be molded at all. They never wanted you to think for yourself, because if you did, if you truly opened your eyes, you would see the cracks in the foundation they stood upon. You would see the contradictions, the hypocrisy, the fear beneath their authority. And once you saw it, they knew they could never force you to unsee it. So they did everything they could to make sure you never looked too closely. The unquestioned beliefs, for a long time you accepted it, not because you truly believed in their words, but because you didn't know you had a choice. You were surrounded by their certainty, suffocated by their voices, drowned in their definitions of right and wrong, success and failure, strength and weakness, and so you carried their words like weights around your neck. They told you who to be, and you wore it like a second skin. They told you what was possible, and you never dared to dream beyond it. They told you what was acceptable, and you silenced the parts of yourself that didn't fit, because that's how it works, doesn't it? When you're raised in a world that refuses to give you options, you don't realize there's another way. You don't question what's been carved into stone. You don't rebel against a reality you've never been allowed to escape. You become what they need you to be, not because it's who you are, but because it's the only way to survive. But survival is not the same as living. The pressure to conform. The more you tried to squeeze yourself into their expectations, the more you felt yourself disappearing. They taught you that acceptance had conditions, that love was something you had to earn, that if you wanted to belong, you had to play by their rules. Smile when you felt like screaming. Nod when you wanted to shake your head. Stay in line, stay in place, stay in the role they assigned to you. And when you tried to resist, when you dared to question, They pulled you back, not with chains, but with guilt. Not with violence, but with doubt. They didn't have to silence you if they could make you silence yourself. So they fed you fear, one careful drop at a time. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of standing alone. Don't be difficult. Don't cause trouble. Don't be the reason people talk. Their words wrapped around your throat like a noose, tightening every time you thought about stepping out of line. And so, for a while, you stopped trying. You played the part. You convinced yourself that maybe, just maybe, they were right. That maybe the dreams you had, the thoughts you carried, the fire burning in your chest were nothing more than foolish distractions. You became the version of yourself that made them comfortable, and they mistook your silence for submission. The breaking point. But silence does not mean surrender. You may have played along, you may have followed the script, you may have nodded in all the right places, smiled at all the right moments, pretended to be exactly who they needed you to be. But deep down, something was shifting. A single crack in their illusion, small at first, a whisper in the back of your mind, growing louder with every passing day. And then, one day, it happened. The moment you saw it all for what it was. Maybe it was a conversation that rubbed you the wrong way, a realization that settled in your bones like a slow, creeping fire. A single question that refused to be ignored. Maybe it was the way they dismissed your dreams with a laugh that sounded too much like chains rattling in the distance. The way they shut you down with words so sharp they left wounds where they landed. Maybe it was the moment you finally looked in the mirror and realized you didn't recognize the person staring back at you. Whatever it was, it shattered something inside of you. You saw the cracks in the foundation. You saw the fear in their certainty. You saw the way their truth was built on nothing more than repetition, passed down, never questioned, never examined. And in that moment, you realized something they never wanted you to know. They were never defining you. They were defining themselves. They were building a world that kept them safe, that kept them powerful, that kept them from ever having to face the possibility that they might be wrong. And for the first time, you saw the truth. The version of you they tried to create was never real. The person they feared, the one who thought for themselves, who refused to accept limits, who questioned everything, that was the real you. And that's when everything changed, because once you see the truth, you can never go back. Once you know that you were never meant to live in their box, you can never shrink yourself to fit inside it again. Once you taste the first breath of freedom, nothing can ever convince you to be silent again. And that was the moment they lost their power over you, because they built their world on the belief that you would never question it. And now they're the ones questioning everything. Doubt does not arrive like a storm. It does not crash into your life with thunder and lightning, announcing its presence with undeniable force. No, doubt is quieter, more insidious. It seeps in like a slow poison, disguised as love, as wisdom, as concern. It does not shout, it whispers, softly enough that you don't notice it tightening around your throat. And before you know it, their words are no longer just words. They become your reality. At first, you don't even realize it's happening. You laugh along when they mock your dreams, telling yourself it's just a joke. You shrink a little when they tell you not to be too much, convincing yourself they're only trying to protect you. You hesitate before speaking, before acting, before reaching for what you want, because somewhere along the way you learn that speaking too boldly, wanting too fiercely, reaching too far is dangerous. And so you hesitate. You start to second guess every move you make. You weigh every thought against their expectations, every decision against their approval. Will they think I'm foolish for trying this? Am I being selfish for wanting more? Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't have what it takes. Their words are no longer external. They've settled inside you now, carving themselves into the walls of your mind until they feel like your own, until you can't tell the difference between their voices and your own. And that is how they win. Not by forcing you into submission, but by making you believe that you chose it. Echoes of their voices, the way their expectations became your inner dialogue. It's terrifying how easily their voices become your own. How their criticisms, their doubts, their rules, spoken so many times, begin to feel like truths. You'll never make it on your own. You're not strong enough to do this. You think you're different, but you're just like everyone else. You tell yourself you're being realistic. You tell yourself you're just trying to be practical, but the truth is, you're afraid. Afraid that they might be right. Afraid of proving them wrong, only to fail. Afraid that stepping outside their expectations will leave you lost, alone, unworthy of love. Because that's what they made you believe, isn't it? That love is conditional, that acceptance is earned through obedience. That if you stray too far from what they deem acceptable, you will lose everything. And so you live in fear. Not just fear of failure, but fear of your own power. Because what if, just what if, you really do have the strength to break free? What if you are more capable, more resilient, more extraordinary than they ever allowed you to believe. What if the only thing holding you back is them? Living in their shadow, the struggle of trying to meet a standard that was never meant for you. You spent so long trying to measure up to their standards, standards that were never meant for you, rules that were never designed with your freedom in mind, expectations that were built to keep you small. You followed their script. You did what was expected. You checked every box, played every part. And yet, no matter how much you gave, it was never enough. Because the truth is, they never wanted you to succeed on your own terms. They only wanted you to succeed within their system. They only wanted you to rise as long as it was by their standards, through their approval, within the cage they built for you. And if you succeeded in a way they didn't expect, if you dared to redefine what success looked like, they called it rebellion. They called it selfishness. They called it arrogance. Because your success, your real success, would force them to face a truth they never wanted to confront. That their way was never the only way. That their version of reality was never truth, only control. That the things they told you were impossible were only impossible because they never had the courage to try. The slow awakening, the first time you dared to wonder. What if they were wrong? It started as a whisper, a quiet thought, a fleeting moment of clarity. What if they're wrong? What if all the things they told you about yourself, about the world, about your limits were never true? What if they only told you those things to keep you from trying, to keep you from proving them wrong, to keep you from rising beyond the reality they built for themselves? And once the question entered your mind, it refused to leave, because once you begin to see through the cracks, you can never unsee them. Once you start to question, the answers begin to reveal themselves in ways you never imagined. You start to notice how they shrink when confronted, how their confidence wavers when questioned, how their entire belief system relies not on truth, but on repetition. And you start to realize something they never wanted you to understand. They are not strong. They are afraid of change, afraid of losing control, afraid of being exposed for what they truly are, people who built their lives on a fragile foundation of unchallenged assumptions. And you, the one they doubted, the one they tried to silence, the one they never expected to rise, you are the greatest threat to their illusion. Because you are proof that their version of the world is not absolute. Their rules do not define reality. That their doubts were never about you, they were about themselves. And now, for the first time in your life, you realize the truth. You were never the problem. They were just afraid of what you might become. And now, it's too late for them to stop you. It didn't happen all at once. There was no grand explosion, no sudden breaking of chains, no dramatic declaration of defiance. No, when you finally stopped listening, it was quiet, subtle, a shift so small they didn't even notice it at first. But you noticed. It was in the way their words began to lose their weight, in the way their opinions no longer felt like law, in the way you caught yourself hesitating, not out of fear, but out of realization that you no longer believed them. They said you were incapable, and for the first time, you questioned if that was ever true. They said you needed them, and for the first time, you wondered if that was a lie. They said the world outside their rules was dangerous, and for the first time, you thought, but what if it's free? It was not rebellion, not yet, not something they could see, but something had shifted. And once the shift began, there was no stopping it. The rebellion within, the whisper that grew into a roar. At first, it was just a whisper, a thought you dared not speak aloud, a quiet defiance against the rules, against the mold they forced you into. You stopped agreeing just to keep the peace. You stopped explaining yourself when they twisted your words. You stopped lowering your voice to make them comfortable. They noticed, not right away, but slowly they began to sense it. The way you carried yourself differently, the way you no longer folded under their scrutiny. They mistook it for a phase, a passing mood. They had spent years training you to obey. They thought a few days, a few weeks, a few fleeting moments of doubt would not undo their work. But what they didn't realize, what they refused to see, was that doubt is a fire. And once it starts burning, it does not go out. The first act of self-definition. The moment you chose yourself over their expectations, it wasn't a war, not at first. It was a single choice, small, almost insignificant, but it was yours. For the first time in your life, you made a decision without looking for their approval, without seeking their validation, without asking yourself, what will they think? What will they say? Maybe it was the way you dressed. Maybe it was the way you spoke. Maybe it was a dream you dared to chase, despite their laughter ringing in your ears. Maybe it was the first time you told them no. Whatever it was yours. A decision made not out of fear, not out of duty, not out of expectation, but out of truth. And in that moment, everything changed. because now you knew something they never wanted you to understand. You could choose yourself, you could defy them, and the world would not end. The fear of becoming too much, how they reacted when they saw you slipping away. They had always taught you to be small, to shrink yourself, to fit into their world, to quiet your thoughts, your desires, your fire, because anything too loud, too big, too bold was dangerous. And for so long you obeyed. You folded yourself into the version of you that made them comfortable. You traded authenticity for acceptance, independence for approval. But now they saw it happening. They saw you slipping from their grasp, and they panicked, not because they loved you, not because they feared for you, but because they needed you to stay small to feel big themselves. So they did what they always do. They tried to pull you back, maybe with guilt, after everything we've done for you, maybe with shame. You've changed, and not for the better. Maybe with fear. The world will chew you up and spit you out. You'll regret this. Or maybe, when words failed, they resorted to silence. They withdrew their love like it was something you had to earn. They made their disapproval known in glances, in sighs, in quiet, punishing distance. But this time, did not work. Because you had tasted something they could never take back. You had tasted freedom. And once you've had even a glimpse of what it means to truly be yourself, to speak without fear, to move without chains, to exist without apology, you can never go back. So they tried to hold you down, but what they didn't understand, what they could never understand, was that they had already lost. Because the moment you stopped listening, the moment you chose yourself over them, was the moment they no longer had control. And now, they're the ones afraid of what you might become, afraid of what you might uncover, afraid that the power they spent years trying to strip from you was never theirs to take. And now you are no longer afraid, because you have finally heard your own voice, and it is louder than all of their doubts combined. They thought they had time to shape you, time to pull you back, time to remind you of who you were supposed to be, but time betrayed them, because before they knew it, you were gone. Not physically perhaps, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You had stepped beyond the boundaries they had so carefully drawn around you, and no matter how hard they tried, they could not bring you back. And that terrified them, because control only works if the person being controlled believes in it. And you no longer did. They saw it in your eyes first, the way they could no longer reach you the way they once did, the way their words landed differently, no longer as commands, but as noise. Then they saw it in your actions, the way you made choices without waiting for their permission, the way you stood taller, spoke clearer, moved freer. Then they saw it in others, people who used to see you as they did, small, dependent, easy to mold, were now looking at you differently, with respect, with admiration, with curiosity. And that's when they knew they had lost you, and that's when the panic set in. Because if they couldn't mold you, if they couldn't dictate your choices, define your worth, shape your future, then what were they left with? The unsettling realization that they never truly had control to begin with. The questions they never wanted to ask, how your transformation forced them to see themselves differently. You were supposed to be a reflection of them, proof that their way of thinking, their choices, their beliefs were right. But now, as they watched you stand on your own, strong, unshaken, thriving, they were left with a question they never wanted to ask. What if we were wrong? What if the rules they followed, the same ones they tried to force upon you, were nothing more than chains? What if the sacrifices they made weren't necessary? What if the limits they swore were real, were only real because they never dared to push past them? Your existence, your growth, your freedom was proof that the life they accepted without question might not have been the only way. And that realization terrified them, because if you could rise above the fears they instilled in you, if you could break the mold they swore was unbreakable, then what was stopping them from doing the same? The answer? Nothing. Nothing except their own unwillingness to change. And that's a truth they could not afford to face. The silent battles, the tension between your growth and their resistance to change. They won't say it outright, they never do. Instead, the battle takes shape in 1,000 subtle ways. A condescending smile when you speak of your dreams, a dismissive laugh when they hear of your success, a careful, almost desperate attempt to downplay your transformation. Because if they acknowledge it, if they recognize how far you've come, then they must also acknowledge something far more painful, that they chose to stay where they are. So they fight, not with fists, not with words, but with silence, with cold distance, with passive-aggressive comments and calculated indifference. Or worse, some try to reclaim control, not by stopping you, but by rewriting history. They tell people they always believed in you, that they always knew you were meant for more, that your strength is a reflection of them, because if they can convince themselves and everyone else that they helped you rise, then they don't have to face the truth, that they were the ones trying to keep you down. But deep down, they know the truth. They see it every time they look at you. How you became a mirror? The unsettling truth. They see their own fears and failures in your strength. You were never their enemy. You never wanted war. All you ever wanted was to be yourself, to define your life on your own terms, to exist outside of their expectations. But to them, that was the ultimate betrayal, not because of what it said about you, but because of what it said about them. Every time they see you now, they are forced to confront the choices they made, the dreams they abandoned, the fears they let consume them. You are a mirror, and when they look at you, they don't just see you. They see every opportunity they let slip away. They see the courage they never had. They see the person they could have been if only they had dared to break free. And that is why they resent you. Not because you failed, but because you didn't. Not because you lost yourself, but because you found yourself. Not because you are weak, but because you are everything they were too afraid to be. And now the weight of their own regret is theirs to carry. Because their doubt did not break you, it built you. And now they must live with the realization that you, the one they tried to control, to limit, to define, are the very person they never had the courage to become. And nothing terrifies them more. They will never say the words out loud. They will never say them. You will never hear them admit that they were wrong about you, that they tried to break you, that they doubted you because they feared what your success would mean for them. Instead, their apologies come in different forms, coated in bitterness, disguised as advice, wrapped in the same control they once wielded so openly. When they realized they could no longer dictate your choices, they shifted their strategy. They no longer told you what to do. Instead, they planted doubt in a new way. Are you sure this is the right path? You know, not everyone is cut out for this. I just don't want to see you get hurt. They framed it as concern, as wisdom, as experience speaking. But you knew better. You saw through the carefully chosen words, the subtle manipulation, the way they still tried to control you, not with force, but with carefully placed seeds of doubt. Because if they couldn't stop you outright, maybe, just maybe, they could make you stop yourself. Their attempt to dismiss you, laughing at your ambition, questioning your choices, trying to reduce your impact. When their doubt didn't shake you, they turned to mockery. They laughed at your ambition, at your ideas, at the mere thought that you could become something more than what they allowed. They spoke about you with a smirk, with condescending amusement, as if your success was an illusion, as if your dreams were childish fantasies they had outgrown. And when laughter didn't work, they dismissed you altogether. They questioned your choices, not because they truly cared, but because they needed to believe you were making a mistake. You're just lucky. It's just a phase. One day you'll realize you should have listened to us. But what they didn't understand was this: doubt could no longer touch you, because you had already won the battle within yourself. And no amount of laughter, no amount of dismissal, no amount of carefully crafted condescension could shake the foundation you had built from the very doubts they once tried to use against you. The subtle signs of fear when they started copying you, when their confidence wavered, and then one day something strange happened. You saw them hesitate. You saw the certainty in their eyes flicker, if only for a moment. You saw the cracks in their confidence, the way they suddenly seemed unsure. And then, even stranger, you saw them start to imitate you. The very things they mocked, they started doing themselves. The mindset they ridiculed, they suddenly embraced. The risks they warned you against, they began to take. At first, they tried to hide it, but you saw it. Because deep down, they weren't just watching you. They were learning from you. Because when they mocked you, it wasn't out of hatred. It was out of fear. Fear that you were right. Fear that you saw something they didn't. Fear that you were creating a life they had once dreamed of, but never dared to reach for. And now, watching you succeed, watching you thrive, watching you become everything they once told you was impossible, they had no choice but to confront the truth. Their private realization that they had spent a lifetime under false beliefs, ones you dismantled effortlessly. They won't say it out loud. They will never sit across from you and confess. You were right. I was wrong. I held you back not because you were incapable, but because I was afraid of what your growth would say about me. But you don't need to hear it, because you already know. You see it in the way they avoid certain conversations, the way they grow silent when others praise you, the way they hesitate before giving you advice, because they know, deep down, that their version of truth no longer holds the same power over you. And maybe, just maybe, Late at night when no one is watching, they wonder. They wonder what life might have been like if they had dared to think as you do. If they had challenged the rules, broken the mold, chased the dreams they buried beneath practicality and fear. They wonder if after all this time, they were the ones who needed to change. But that is their burden to carry now, not yours, because you have already stepped beyond the limits they placed on you. You have already freed yourself from the weight of their expectations. And the truth is this: they will spend the rest of their lives haunted by the realization that you, the one they tried to hold back, the one they underestimated, the one they doubted the most, were the one who saw the truth all along. And now, their regret is theirs to keep. Because no matter how much they wish they could go back, no matter how many times they try to rewrite the past, no matter how much they long to undo the damage of their doubt, it is too late. You are already unstoppable. There was a time when their approval was everything. You measured your worth by their acceptance. You questioned every decision, every dream, every move, waiting for their nod, their permission, their validation. But that time is gone, because now you have tasted something far greater than their approval. You have stepped into something far more powerful than their acceptance. You have stepped into yourself. And in doing so, you have made a choice that shifts the entire balance of power. You no longer need them to see you. You no longer need them to understand you, because you see yourself. You understand yourself, and that is more than enough. The freedom of becoming unapologetic, how you stopped explaining yourself for so long you tried to make them understand. You explained yourself over and over. You laid out your thoughts, your choices, your dreams, hoping that if you just worded it right, they would finally see. But they never did, because it was never about understanding. It was never about logic. It was about control. They wanted to keep you in a position where you felt the need to explain, to justify, to prove yourself. Because as long as you were explaining, you were still asking for permission. And then, one day, you simply stopped. You no longer felt the urge to defend your choices. You no longer sought their approval before making a move. You no longer cared if they got it or not. Because your life, your path, your purpose was never meant for them to understand. It was meant for you to live. And with that realization, you became something they could no longer control. You became unapologetic. And nothing is more powerful than a person who no longer seeks permission to exist as they are. Their last desperate attempts to control the narrative, how they tried to rewrite history, pretending they were always supportive. And then something strange happened. The same people who doubted you, the same people who mocked you, the same people who told you it was impossible, that you were dreaming too big, that you were out of line. Now, they speak of you differently. They tell others how they always knew you would make it. They share your success like they were part of the journey. They rewrite the past, erasing their doubt, their dismissiveness, their disbelief, crafting a new story where they were always in your corner. Because now, they see what you have built. Now, they see what they tried to break but could not destroy, and they cannot bear to admit the truth, that they were wrong, that they tried to hold you back, as the tribe that they spent years doubting you, only to be proven wrong in the most undeniable way possible. So they rewrite history, not for you, but for themselves, to ease their own guilt, to erase their own shame, to pretend they were never the one standing in your way. But you remember, and you do not need their rewritten version of the past, because the truth is written in your scars, and your scars tell a different story. The final realization, you never needed them to believe in you, you just needed to believe in yourself. This is the moment they never prepared for, the moment where you finally understand the greatest truth of all, that you never needed their belief, that their doubt was never a reflection of you, it was a reflection of them, that their approval was never the key to your success, it was only ever a cage designed to keep you from it. And now, standing in your power, walking in your truth, existing without apology or hesitation, you are free, not because they finally accepted you, not because they finally see your worth, but because you always had it, even when they didn't see it. Because you believed, even when they didn't. And that is why they could never stop you. Because your power never came from them, it came from you. And now, the world will see it too. You were never just fighting for yourself. Maybe you didn't see it at first. Maybe, in the beginning, it felt like a battle you had to face alone. A personal war, a quiet rebellion, a lonely walk away from everything they told you was true. But you weren't alone. They were watching, the ones who were still trapped. The ones who had swallowed the same lies, who had been taught to stay silent, who had convinced themselves that freedom was just a dream. And then they saw you. They saw you rise despite the doubt. They saw you defy despite the warnings. They saw you become something they were always told was impossible. And it made them wonder, if you could do it, maybe they could too. Your courage did not just free you. It sent ripples through the world around you. It cracked the illusion, made others question, made them doubt the rules they once obeyed without hesitation. And that is what terrifies them the most. Because your rebellion was never just yours. It was the first spark in a fire they will never be able to put out. The generations you will change, the ripple effect of rejecting their limiting beliefs. This is where their legacy ends. Not because you destroyed it, but because you refused to carry it forward. The fear they lived in, the chains they accepted, the doubts they passed down like inheritance. It stops with you. Because the generations before you may have chosen obedience. They may have chosen silence. They may have chosen to stay inside the lines drawn for them. But you didn't. And now, the generations after you will never have to know what it means to live in that cage. Because of you, they will grow up in a world where they are not afraid to dream. Because of you, they will never have to unlearn what you had to fight to break free from. Because of you, they will walk paths that were once impossible, not because they are fearless, but because they never learned to be afraid in the first place. And that is a legacy worth leaving behind. The future they can't predict, the limitless potential they tried to suppress but ultimately fueled. They spent years trying to define you, to limit you, to mold you into something they could understand. But now, you are beyond their comprehension. You are something they never prepared for. Because how could they prepare for something they refused to believe was possible? They tried to control your future. But the irony? They only fueled it. Every time they doubted you, you grew stronger. Every time they tried to suppress you, you became more determined. Every time they tried to keep you in the dark, you found your own light. And now, standing here, in the life they swore you would never have, and the power they never thought you could hold, you are living proof that they never had control, that the future is yours, that there is no limit, no end, no ceiling to what you can become, because you decide, not them. Not anymore. Final call to action. Will you keep walking forward, or will you waste time waiting for them to understand? You have already won. Not because they finally believe in you, not because they finally understand, not because they have changed, but because you have. And now the question is no longer about them. It's about you. Will you keep walking? Will you keep rising? Will you keep pushing forward regardless of who sees, who claps, who follows? Or will you waste time waiting? Waiting for them to catch up, waiting for them to apologize, waiting for them to finally say the words you spent years hoping to hear? No, that is not who you are anymore. They had their chance to walk beside you, and they chose to stand still. But you have places to go, and you are not looking back.